What's up, everyone? Matt here with Down Once More, and it is time to talk episode 4 of The Last of Us, titled Please Hold On to My Hand. So, if you haven't watched previous recaps, this will be full spoilers. I'm not going to do a full recap breakdown, just discuss some thoughts, some things that stood out for me from the episode. I'm recording this right after I watched the episode, so I don't have a ton of insight into things. I haven't seen other interviews been posted after that. I've watched the episode and the after the show discussion. So, a few things right off the bat. HBO announced that they will be streaming the new episode 5, Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time to avoid the Super Bowl. So that sounds to me like it's still going to be airing on regular HBO. So if you're watching it there instead of streaming, you're still going to have to wait till Sunday night. Otherwise, it's going to be out Friday night. I will record my recap Friday night and put it out for episode 5. So you should see that late Friday night, early Saturday morning. A couple other things from this. We get introduced to two new characters that were not in the video games in this episode. We get introduced to Melanie Linsky's Kathleen, who is the leader of the resistance in Kansas City, which was changed from Pittsburgh in the games. But in Kansas City, she leads this resistance that has apparently overthrown the quarantine zone there and taken out Fedra there and now runs this place. And then the other main new character we are introduced to is Perry, played by Jeffrey Pierce, who played Tommy in the Last of Us video games. So it's neat to see him getting a role in this show. And Perry seems like a very interesting character, former military, kind of leading the resistance's armed forces alongside Kathleen. So it seems to be kind of her second in command. This episode, we open seeing some Joel and Ellie traveling. It opens with Ellie playing with the gun that she stole from Frank's drawer in episode 3 at Bill and Frank's house at the end and stashed in her pack without telling Joel. And she's playing with it very both curiously and confidently. She almost seems like she has almost like a bloodlust, the way that she's playing with it, examining the bullet, smelling the gun. But it's hard to tell. It seems like a bloodlust more based on her reaction from previous things as well. We saw at the end of episode 1 when Joel's beating that Fedra guard to death, that she almost gets like a bloodlust look in her eyes and that look on her face. And we see that a little bit more in her face here when she's examining that pistol. At least that's what it seemed like to me. It could just be curiosity, but that's what it looks like. It looks like they're painting Ellie slightly different than she is in the games. In the game, she's very tough on the exterior, but she's not constantly pushing for a gun, from what I can remember, and she's more hesitant about killing, at least initially. So those are some different things we see. We see Joel and Ellie's dynamic grow. We see our first use of Ellie's pun joke book that players of the game will recognize. They use some of the same puns that are used in the game as well. So it almost seems like Ellie and Bella Ramsey confirmed this in the after the show interview that in their mind, Ellie kind of enjoys annoying Joel. She doesn't care that she's doing it. She kind of likes poking him, egging him on a little bit. We see through their travels, Joel warns Ellie about the people. That's what they need to look out for, not Fedra, not the infected, but the people won't just rob them. They can do worse. And so that's why they can't build a fire when they're camping out on their way to Kansas City. And then when they get to Kansas City, they get lost because they have to go around a closed-in tunnel, and we see something straight out of the games where someone's pretending to be hurt, asking for help, and Joel buckles the seatbelt, tells Ellie to buckle up, and says that they're going to go. Ellie says, "Aren't we going to help him?" He says, "Nope." He does have the line in the game that he's not hurt, and they're ambushed. Their truck, they crash it into a storefront, just like they do in the games, and are forced to fight a group of the resistance that is there. And Ellie is forced to use the gun that she has to save Joel because Joel's gun jams and he didn't hear someone coming. It gets taken off guard. And so Ellie shoots the person, doesn't kill him. Joel sends her away and kills the teenager. He seems like he's a teenager. He's begging for his life, trying to introduce himself, say where his mom is, try to gain that pity and the sympathy from Joel and Ellie. And they still put him down. Joel sends Ellie away. You kind of see, kind of like a look on her face that as she shoots him, that confidence that we saw at the beginning, that kind of bravado and bloodlust look, what seemed like it with the gun, that having to actually do the act, you can see that it shakes her up. But Craig Mazin said in the after the show that Joel sends her away so he can kill the guy with the knife, and so she doesn't see it. And when Ellie goes away around the corner of the wall, she wipes off a couple tears and then goes to acting like nothing happened because she's just like Joel. Which, at this stage, that's okay. That's what we can expect to kind of see from that character. And it's more as they go on, you see that she's cold. Joel's kind of cold. They know what they have to do at times. But I'll be interested to see where the rest of the series goes, because I feel like the differences in Joel and Ellie are what are actually key in the game. Yes, they have a lot of similarities, but the things Ellie has are what brings out the best in Joel, without getting into spoiler territory of the games. So, I don't know. That's the only kind of change that could be kind of concerning to me where we go from here. One other thing I will say, I felt like all the previous episodes have gotten progressively either on par or just as good. I didn't feel like this episode topped last week's episode. I think it could be difficult for 1, 2, for how different episode 3 was with Bill and Frank. But this one, it which, to be fair, it's to be expected in a series like this, but it felt more like a setup episode for what's really going to go down in episode 5, which, if you watch the preview for next week's episode, looks like next week's episode is going to be the craziest episode that we've seen yet. So it had some action moments. It had some good character bonding moments for Joel and Ellie that we see kind of their connection grow. Joel later on, as they're hiding, is showing Ellie, he's asking her, you can see that he feels like he failed her with her having to shoot that guy, that he should have been more aware. He missed that. No one Ellie's age, that young, should ever have to do that or go through that. And he apologizes to her, and Ellie wipes a couple tears away and then tells Joel that wasn't her first. He doesn't need to worry about that. That wasn't her first. She didn't have to shoot her first human because of him. And after that, Joel kind of lightens up and he shows her how to properly hold the pistol and gives it to her. And he tells her to put it in her pack because he doesn't want her shooting her ass off. And then Ellie, not listening, this is a trend we've seen, puts the pistol in her pocket instead of in her pack. So I'm sure that will come back to haunt later. Not listening to Joel's rules he laid out at the end of episode 3. So I touched on Melanie Lynskey is playing Kathleen, one of the new characters in this. And Melanie Lynskey, the most recent thing I've seen her in is the Showtime series Yellow Jackets, which, if you haven't watched that, highly recommend. Season 1 is fantastic. It kind of gives, now I can't remember what the book is. Kids with the conch shell crashed on an island, go crazy. I don't know. It gives vibes of that. If you know what I'm talking about, great. If not, you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? But it's about teenagers. Plane goes down. They're stuck in the wilderness, have to survive, and then things that haunt them. It's got some supernatural elements too. It's very unique. Highly recommend checking it out. Season 2 comes out in March, I think. And Melanie Lynskey is fantastic in that. I thought she was really good in this episode. There were certain lines that I didn't think seemed all that menacing. And in the game, in Pittsburgh, it's just a random group of survivors that are taken out, trapping people, stealing their supplies, killing them, burning the bodies, everything like that. And Neil Druckmann was talking in the after the show and says that they kind of wanted to personify the group instead of it just being an obstacle, kind of being bullet fodder and one more thing you have to go through, like in the game. They wanted to give them a reason, some motivation. And we don't know exactly what that is, but when we're introduced to Kathleen, she's interrogating an older guy who we find out was a doctor and trying to find. She keeps asking about Henry, says he knows where Henry is. She's trying to find out what Henry did. And we don't get a lot of information as to why, except she does make a comment about she wonders if the Fedra cell that they have the doctor in is the same one that her brother was beaten to death in. And there's comments almost seeming like she thinks Henry is the one that gave up her brother to Fedra. So we don't know exactly why, but her and her group are hunting down Henry and wanting to kill him and everyone associated with him. They also, towards the end of the episode, Perry tells Kathleen they found a sign of him, take him into an attic. We see a whole bunch of empty cans of food, and there are drawings by a kid in there too. And that's when Kathleen mentions Henry won't let Sam go starving, which if you've played the games, you know who Henry and Sam are. We don't get overtly introduced them to them in this episode, but Joel and Ellie, as they're hiding out in one of the buildings, the episode ends with Ellie waking Joel up, and she is being held at gunpoint by a kid looking like he's in his 20s. And Joel wakes up and looks, and there's a kid younger than Ellie pointing his gun at him. So, assumption, that's Henry and Sam. And that's going to be where we pick up next week in episode 5. I did like a lot of things about this episode. I liked that we actually got to spend more time with Joel and Ellie. While episode 3 was fantastic, it's good to be back with Joel and Ellie in this episode. And I'm excited to see where episode 5 goes. They did have Jeremy Webb. He directed this episode and he directed next week's episode 2. So I like when they have some continuation on some of those main through lines when you have the same director and it gets kind of the same vibe, same feel on that. So I'm interested to learn more about Kathleen's motivations and what the deal is, what they view Henry did to them. Henry and Sam in the games, they're just other survivors that got trapped in Pittsburgh and are being hunted by this group. So whatever they did or the perception of what they did, that's going to be new. And the other big reveal that we get in this episode is Perry shows Kathleen what looks like a sinkhole in this one building, and it almost pulses. And you can tell that they are shaken. Fuck, this is a big thing. Perry says, we need to tell everyone. Kathleen says, not yet. We need Henry to be the focus. We'll just keep this building locked down as much as we can. So I don't have a ton of extra insider thoughts on this. I really liked breaking out the joke book, the pun book from the games, getting to see that. And I really liked seeing the emotion and the arc that we're going through with Ellie. We also got a moment like in the game where she asked Joel how he knew that guy wasn't actually hurt, and Joel tells her that he's been on both sides of it. He's been the ones doing the ambush, the ones that have been ambushed with Tess and Tommy. We also had earlier in the episode, Joel reveals more about Tommy. He had joined the military right when he turned 18, went to Desert Storm, fought in the Gulf War, and then came back home because it wasn't what he thought. He had wanted to be a hero. Then when the infection showed up, he convinced Joel to go to the Boston QZ and join Tess and that group out there. And then Marlene and Tommy met, and Marlene convinced him to join the Fireflies, and then he left the Fireflies. So saying Tommy's always a joiner and wanting to be a hero. So that's kind of the first kind of backstory that we get some more on Tommy, because all we knew was that he was gone and Joel blamed Marlene for it. So a really strong episode again. It wasn't my favorite of the season. I really enjoyed it. I liked what it set up and what's to come in episode 5. But overall, I think this was probably actually my least favorite episode of the season so far. But still, that's comparing it to a pretty high bar. So be excited to see what's yet to come in the series. Lots of promising things. Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann are still crushing it. and I'm excited to see the action next week early. So I'm going to wrap it up there, and we'll see you next Friday or Saturday after episode 5 airs. And don't forget to go down once more. Check out the other episodes we've got on the channel from the other pod. We just did a recap of Love Never Dies. We did a recap. It's pod's been out for a year now, so we did kind of a year in review on that with some of our favorite clips. So check it out. Like, comment, subscribe. Tell us your thoughts on episode 4 down below, and keep it real. And also, if people are enjoying this series, highly recommend you play the game. It's coming out to PC on March 28th. So even if you don't have a PlayStation, if you have a computer, you'll be able to play it if you have high enough graphics capability. So fantastic game, fantastic storytelling in there. And that'll do it.